Okay, hopefully we can make a start. Thank you very much for coming, especially since I know how many other things there are competing for your time, so thanks for giving up an hour and a half or so to come and listen to us. So Ruth and I are going to talk for about 30 minutes-ish, and then hopefully we can get into some interesting questions from the audience and some discussion. Okay? Before I start, how many of you are interested in pursuing a career in the built environment when you graduate? I've asked this question I've probably asked you before, but this is for Ruth's benefit. So that's good, Ruth.
Yeah, that's really
excellent. Good. No pressure.
Yeah, that's really good.
Okay, so very quick introduction. Apologies for those who have heard this before, but Ruth hasn't, so I ought to say. So first of all, I am Ian Durbin. I am a visiting professor at UCL, have been for about 10 years. And the first thing I should say is that I'm old. I'm so old that I've actually gone through my career. My 35 plus years career as a consulting engineer and senior leader at Hoare Lea, who are an MEP firm. And at the end of my career, and actually probably post that into retirement, it suddenly struck me that people of my age that have sort of, without sort of wanting to blow my own trumpet, but that have achieved stuff, that there's a lot of wisdom in those people, and which I can't help thinking would be advantageous for your generation to hear. And I certainly wish that I'd got some of that wisdom when I was a student, like you are. And of course, it's not just about my wisdom; it's about loads of other people's wisdom that I'm lucky enough to know from lots of different disciplines, because I think that's important that you get a balanced view of wisdom. And the whole of this vehicle was really driven around how can we harness that wisdom and how can we get it to you, really. So we pulled together this year a set of 5 talks. We had opened by myself. We had Joe Thornton from CAST, who was talking about money, which is very good. Anna last week talking about sustainability and the journey of sustainability over her 25-year career. We've obviously got Ruth today. I'll introduce Ruth in a minute, but next week we've got another colleague of Ruth's, Matt Jones, who's the director at Hoare Lea, who's probably the person I know who's got the most radical ideas about changing our industry to affect its challenges in delivery and also to try and reshape the industry as a whole. So if you can, I would urge you to come along and listen to Matt next week. So just to recap, this is what we're trying to achieve really, is to get some real world experience from the real world as opposed to the academic world to you. And also actually to say, because I think it's pretty important for you to hear, that actually, I mean, I absolutely love my career. I've probably enjoyed I would probably say every day that I went to work. It was fantastic. The people you meet, the projects you do. And I would suspect, Ruth, that you would say the same?
Yeah. It's a really fulfilling career.
Yeah. So, I mean, real people telling you the truth. Actually, this is a great career for you to be in. And I'm a massive fan of actually getting you to understand that actually what the industry needs is for you not to know all the things that you need to know. Not just that, obviously that's crucially important, and a lot of that is what you're going to pick up at university, but actually is to know how to deploy that and be effective. Effectiveness is what the industry wants. It's what our clients want from the industry. It's what the planet wants from the industry. And there's a knack to that. So the idea of these talks is to try and pass on as much wisdom as we can that actually helps you to shape your own effectiveness, because it's never too early to start thinking about how effective you can be. So a little bit of an introduction to Ruth. I've known Ruth for about 8 years. I think you have a 25 plus year career. Sorry to rub that in.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about Ruth is she started out as an MEP engineer and has sort of transitioned through lighting and daylighting and then into senior leadership at Hoare Lea. So she's got a variety of experience to trawl her wisdom from. And also she has an MSc and a PhD, so she's got some academic experience as well. And I would think that Ruth would agree that she's passionate about helping to shape the next generation of our industry, So it didn't take me long to persuade her to come and talk. So I think she's got a lot of wisdom on offer, and her talk and the Q&A afterwards is about trying to pass that wisdom on. So I would say, like I say on all these talks, it's not like we're telling you that 2 + 2 = 4. There's a lot of subtlety in all of this. So I would urge you to sort of like engage brain to the max and try and understand some of that subtlety. And if you're not sure about any of what we're saying, or it doesn't mean anything to you, doesn't resonate with you, then please ask some questions at any time during the talk. I'm very happy to interrupt Ruth, and then we've got hopefully a chunk of time at the end to get in some further detail. So that's me done. I'll pass over to Ruth.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Hope it wasn't too embarrassing for you.
No, I'm okay.
Especially the 25 years bit.
Yeah.
It's bad enough for me at 35 years.
Well, look, I'm just going to add to it by embarrassing myself, because I've got old photographs to share with you. So welcome everyone. Thanks so much, Ian. It's really nice to see you all. I really appreciate you turning up, because I know you don't have to be here. So, I'm very grateful for that. The title of my talk, The Built Environment Needs You. It's a bit cheeky. It's a bit like, it needs you, But honestly, I think I really want to leave you with that message tonight. I want you to know that the built environment does need you. And I really I hope that I can share a few insights that might help you to understand what really matters, or certainly what I've learned really matters in your career. So, in Ian's introductory talk a few weeks ago, I know I wasn't here, but I've seen the content. So my understanding is very much that he talked about the need to get things done. Because in our climate emergency... Oh, come on in. Welcome.
Plenty of seats at the front. You want bites?
Because we're in a climate emergency, and we need to get all of our built environment to net zero by 2050. And that is, and I've robbed some of these statistics. I've taken them from Ian's slides. That's 20+ million buildings that we need to get to net zero by 2050. And we're currently right at the very beginning of that mountain. We're in the foothills. We're at less than 1%. There's 25 years to go. So what we need is not more people talking about it. We need more people doing something about it. And we need people who are not afraid to challenge the status quo, because the status quo that we've set up, if you like, and I'm saying we, this is partly down to people of my sort of stage generation. We've set up a status quo that means we're really good at talking about it and setting up systems and frameworks and having events and talking to our industry about it. But there's a huge swathe of the built environment out there that's still not being touched by any of this. So, our focus on new buildings, for example, that's a status quo that needs to change. It is beginning to change, but you're going to be a huge part of that. You have an opportunity to be a huge part of that. And it needs smart, brave people. And I'm looking at you. And whoever's going to watch this online, I'm looking at you as well. That's what it needs to do this. Because if we keep doing things the way we've been doing them until now, we're not going to climb that mountain. We're just going to be inching along. And that's not going to be good enough. So just a little bit about me. I don't want to make this too much about me, but I do think it might be helpful just so you understand who I am as a human being. So as Ian said, I work at Hoare Lea, but I'm also have a visiting lecturer role here. So I do some teaching in the first year of the Architectural Engineering course. So I don't know whether I've met any of you before. I also have some involvement with the MSc in Light and Lighting. I studied on that course myself 20 years ago, which is quite a long time ago. I was a president of the Society of Light and Lighting as well in 2021, and I was also a board member of CIBSE until very recently. I handed over to Diane, who took up a role on the board back in, it was June when I officially ended my membership there of my position on the board. So just a little bit then about my career journey. This is me in my first job. So this photograph was taken possibly before some of you were born, 1999. So I joined a company in the Midlands that was called AMEC at the time. Doesn't exist in the same way now. It's become part of something else. But I was very lucky because I studied in Dublin. I studied building services engineering in Dublin, in what is now called Technical University of Dublin. And in my final year, 2 people from AMEC came to my university. So it's a sort of not that dissimilar to what's going on here, but they came to talk to us and tell us a bit about what it's like to work in the built environment. And AMEC was a multidiscipline consultancy, which I found really exciting because a lot of the other opportunities that I was seeing were single discipline engineering consultancies, perhaps just focused on maybe just kind of very small MEP focus. I really liked the idea of the multidiscipline environment, and they interviewed some of us and they offered me a job before I'd graduated, so I was really lucky. And I know that the landscape is very different now, and I know that you can't necessarily walk into a job, but that's what happened to me, so I was really lucky. And it meant that I needed to move away from Ireland, but I was willing to do it because I thought, what have I got to lose here? I'll give it a go. And so I moved over to England and started working here. And in this particular photograph, I just must say, this computer is not even switched on. It's not mine. It's massive. It's a cathode ray, big thing. Not all the desks had computers, so shock, but that was how it was. I spent most of my time working with paper. A lot of my time was drawings that had been printed out, marking them up so that the CAD team could actually draw them on the computer and so on. So yeah, it was a very different world. There was a lot more paper. There was a lot less communication. So I've noticed an observation, I suppose, from looking at this photograph is that back then, when you got an email, you printed it out to go with the letters that you'd received so that you could look at everything on paper. And of course, that would be unthinkable now because the volume of emails that we all receive, even my kids at school get more emails than I did as a graduate consulting engineer. So I think that in itself is a challenge because we have to be able to filter out all the noise and just get to the real important things that are coming towards us. And then what happened next? So I was working as an engineering consultant for a few years. I decided to move to London because AMEC were in Stratford-upon-Avon, which is beautiful, but I really wanted to be in the big city. So I moved down to London and I started working for Max Fordham. And while I was at Max Fordham, I got involved in a few projects where there was a daylight conversation and it was a daylight analysis thing, and there was some software. We were using IES, which is still widely used. We were using that, and I was quite excited by the dynamic kind of building modelling side of things, and I got involved in some daylight modelling, and at the same time, I don't know if I should share this, I wasn't quite fulfilled by mechanical services, which was my focus, because you can't see it. And I was like, in some building services are visible, but in others they're not. Lighting really resonated with me because it's so visual, and I think I really needed that. So I was drawn towards lighting, and I started browsing one day, and I stumbled on an article that was written by Florence Lamb, who works for Arup. She still works for Arup, who had been on an MSc at UCL in lighting. So it was like, oh, there's a course, there's an MSc in lighting, brilliant. So that was the beginning of my journey into lighting, because I then found out more about the course applied to go on it. You know, I got an agreement with my employer that I could have some time off to do that course part-time, and started doing the MSc. So I did that over 2 years. And so, yeah, here's another old photograph. This is me graduating there at the back from my MSc in 2005. So, yeah, 20 years ago. And so, yeah, I think that lighting, as I said, really resonated with me. And when I was on the MSc course, and some of the people that I studied with, who I'm still friends with now, I felt like I'd found a particular place that I felt really at home. Not that I didn't feel at home in the kind of more building services environment, but I definitely found like something that really resonated with me. And then after that, I was sort of transitioning to becoming a lighting designer, and then I moved to Atkins, and I haven't got any images of this, but I worked on several projects there, particularly with the London Underground network. So they were undergoing a refurbishment programme, and I got to be involved with the design of the lighting in several London Underground stations. It's not as glamorous as it sounds, because they weren't new stations, they were existing stations. So it was refurbed, it wasn't glamorous, it was mucky, it's a very dirty environment, but anyway, it was really interesting, technically quite challenging. And then I had my first child, and when we were expecting our first child, we decided to leave London because we were living in a flat. I mean, I think it's a story that many people will tell. We were living in a flat, and we thought, actually, let's move out of London. So we moved to Leicestershire, and that's where we live now. And I had my first child. And then after going back to work and then having my second child, things got more difficult with commuting to London. So I was feeling a bit restless, and I started looking around, and I, again, was very lucky to find an opportunity to study a PhD studentship at a university in Leicester called De Montfort University. And it was related to daylight, so it was a no-brainer for me, because it was, as well as being in a field that I was interested in, it was like a paid position. So you're a PhD student, but you're being paid what they call a stipend. So it just meant that I wasn't losing money. It meant that I was sort of almost cost neutral or whatever, you know, with the family, and that was important. So I looked on it as kind of like a part-time job that I could do while my kids were really small. And my area of study related to this material here that you can see in the image. It's called electrochromic glazing, and it's a type of glazing that changes its optical properties in response to any stimulus, any electrical stimulus. So it's a fascinating material, and my work wasn't about the actual material, making the material, it was about implementing it. So the product was already out there. It was developed by a company in the States. They were called Sage, but they're now part of Saint-Gobain, a large company. Basically they were really keen to get their product into more buildings in Europe, particularly in the UK. So this project was about installing it in a real office and doing fieldwork research with the occupants. So that was where I started to learn about social science as well, and how do we interview people and how do we capture data from people. And I realised that that was another area that really resonated with me was how occupants feel and how they interact with the systems that we design. And so that's what I did. And then I had to wear a very silly hat to graduate from that. And that was in 2016. And then after that, I was a bit lost, actually. And I was just talking to Diane and Ian about this earlier, because that was around the time when I met Diane, because I wasn't sure what to do next. My path at the time was, if you do a PhD, a lot of people do a PhD to have an academic career. But I was doing it mainly because I just wanted to continue my career in a manageable way, and that was the way I was able to do it. But I I realised that I really missed designing buildings. You know, I love the research world, but I also really enjoy being part of a design team and seeing, you know, the work come to life in buildings as well. And I think doing the PhD meant that I did learn a lot about how the academic world operates, and that has been really helpful. But ultimately, I realised that I wanted to go back into consultancy. So that's when I went, Hoare Lea were looking for someone to grow particularly their daylight capability, so it felt like the right thing for me to do. So I joined Hoare Lea. This is kind of, it's a slide that I use when I'm talking to architects about light, because when we talk about lighting as a specialism in building services, people immediately go to artificial lighting. And one of the things that really drove me when I joined Hoare Lea was we embrace light, we embrace all of it. It's all photons, like that's, you know, as far as our body and our brains are concerned, it's all photons. They're coming at us in different forms. And I love the intention of the fact that in the lighting team there, we don't ignore natural light, because you could put it in a bracket, in a separate bracket. You could say that's building physics, that's over there, you know. But instead, we at least try, and it's a continued effort to recognise that people experience light in a very holistic sense. And I find that really exciting. And also the team there are very diverse in terms of their discipline backgrounds as well. And that gives us a great kind of environment for developing creative ideas and the technical depth of that as well. This was just, I thought this photograph just kind of sums up, I suppose, how I feel. I've really enjoyed my time at Hoare Lea. I've been there 8 years now, and this was last year when we won Large Consultancy of the Year. And as I was putting these slides together, I was like, it's like I'm trying to sell Hoare Lea, and I'm not. I'm not trying to sell Hoare Lea. The reason I'm telling you this is because if you find a company, an employer that aligns with your values, you also can have an amazing journey. And I think that company can look like so many different things. It can be small, big, multidiscipline, single discipline, so many different guises. And the main thing is that you can find a place where the thing that makes you, that drives you, also drives them, that they also care about that. And that's one of the most important ingredients, I think, for a fulfilling career. If you go down the route of joining a consultancy. So the next few slides then, that was kind of a bit about my career, and I'm conscious of time, but I've got four things that I thought I would share. So I've tried to pick sort of take home messages, and I've got four of them. So the first one is, don't be afraid to ask questions. And it might be one that you've heard before, and it might be a bit overused, but I can't emphasize it enough, because I know that I sat in many rooms at the beginning of my career, and even later. I sat in many rooms where I thought, I don't know what they're talking about, I don't know what that is, but I'm not going to ask, because that probably just shows me up as not knowing something that I'm supposed to know. And now I realise that actually in almost every case, asking that question would have been helpful. And it's not just helpful for me getting an answer, it's helpful for everyone in the room. Because a lot of the time, if you are not sure what people are talking about, you're not going to be the only one. And on top of that, if you ask a question and you kind of force people to explain what they mean in more detail, that forces them to think about what they're actually saying, and that is really helpful. So I think there's a phrase like helpful naivety. It's a real thing, and if you don't have much experience, that's actually a real strength here, because as I said earlier, we need people to think differently, because how we've been thinking isn't getting us to where we need to go. So if you've got a completely oblique angle and you're coming in and going, but sorry, what does DG P mean and why are we doing it like that? That's good. That's what we need. We need questions. We need people to question things. And then the second one is know your shadow, which is a phrase that I've taken from some of the training, some of the leadership training that I've done in Hoare Lea. And when I initially came to it, I was like, what's that? And what they actually mean, what it really means is know that you have an influence, you have an impact. It's easy to think that when we're at like a graduate level or early in our career, that we don't have much of an influence. The people that have the influence are the people in leadership positions. But actually, you would not believe the influence that you can have by your behaviour and what you say and do in every room and in every interaction that you have. It's much greater than you'll know, and you probably won't really appreciate it until later. And when you look back and when you're interacting with new graduates yourself, and you then realise how they can teach you. You know, like you can teach people that have years and years of experience about a different way to think about something, and that's really valuable. The next one is, third one, is find your thing. And so, like I've told you a little bit about my thing. My thing probably that went through a lot of my career, it was about daylight, because for me it was like a nexus of all the things that I cared about: sustainability, occupant experience, architecture. So it kind of brought a lot of the things that really drove me together. And I would love for all of you to be able to find your thing, because I think it can really carry you through a fulfilling career. So that thing doesn't have to be a technical thing. It doesn't have to be a technical niche. It can be about how teams work together. It can be about project management. It can be about how we manage complex design processes. You know, it can be about how we do things as well as the technical sort of side of things. And then, and I've also got a note here just to mention. There's something called the 5 Whys, which I think is really a fantastic exercise. And it's very simple. If you Google it, you'll find a video from a long time ago with an American man called Simon Sinek.
That's wise as in W-H-Y?
As in W-H-Y, as in the question why. Yeah, thanks. Basically what it is it's an exercise in finding the thing that matters to you. And it might change, you know, it'll change over your career and change over your life. And where it comes from is that when you ask yourself, why do I like this thing? You know, the thing that you've chosen to study. Why do I like this? You'll be able to answer it, but that'll only be on a surface level. So the next step is you ask why again, and then you do that 3 more times. And it's really interesting. I said the other day, it's like having a 5-year-old next to you. But why are you doing that? But why are you doing that? And it actually can be really useful because it forces you to query your own motivations, and it might go really deep and it might be very personal, and you don't have to share that with anyone, but it's for you to do that and to understand what your drivers are, what are the things that matter to you. And that could help you to find the right company, the right place, the right type of career. And then the final thing is it's about people. And I don't know, this might seem really obvious to you guys, but it clicked with me a few years ago that a lot of the things I do are actually about people. In designing buildings, we get very lost in the detail, the technical side of it. We're designing systems, there's all this technical knowledge, there's all these processes, you know, frameworks, all the RIBA stages, all the things that we operate within. We can get very integrated into all of that. And actually, what I've realised is that if we're gonna get closer to net zero, you'll need to convince people about things. So your skills around negotiating skills, communicating, knowing different styles of communication for different audiences, knowing how to win people over into an argument that perhaps, not win people over, but knowing how to convince people about doing something in a way that they've never done it before. I would really encourage you all to tap into that. So, like, we're not all extroverts, we're all different. You know, some of us are very comfortable talking to a room of people and some are not. And that's okay, because there's different modes in all of that, in all of these different personality types. And I just really want to encourage you to take any opportunity you can to enhance, you know, any training, any development, anything that you want to pursue inside your employer organisation or outside of it, to tune into things like negotiating skills, self-awareness, empathy, emotional intelligence, active listening. All of those things will make you more effective, ultimately, more effective in helping us to move closer to net zero, helping to convince people about solutions that might seem radical or different or unfamiliar. So that's kind of one of the final things that I wanted to leave you with. The problems that we face need people skills as well as technical skills. So that's my 4 things. And now we've got some time for, hopefully we've got time if I haven't run over too much.
No, you haven't at all. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Right. Anybody got any questions? Who wants to go first?
So you obviously made it quite far in your career up until this point. Do you feel that you needed to pursue a PhD to reach sort of the more senior position you're in now? Not at all.
No. Sorry, that's a very quick answer. No, the short answer is no, I definitely didn't. I think in the consultancy world, it's not that common to have a PhD, so there isn't an expectation. However, I think it has turned out to be an advantage for me because it's given me I think people say, just taking Hoare Lea as an example, I think people have a different regard because they know that I've gone through that process. You know, if they know anything about PhD, they know that it's quite a rigorous process and that you have to be quite motivated to even do it in the first place. And I think that gives people, you know, it does probably change their regard for me, and they might assume wrongly that I'm an absolute like massive brain that knows everything about something. That's not true, but it doesn't hurt because it helps them to listen. If I need to impart a message or try and influence people about something, that they're more inclined to pay attention, which is clients as well and architects. So it's quite useful. Yeah.
Do you ever use Doctor?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, but not massively. Probably just more professionally. You know, I think I want to use it where I think it will help.
Yeah.
And then where I think it would actually actively not help, I will not use it because there are plenty of situations where it doesn't help you to lead with that. Everyone feels different about it, but that's how I feel.
My view on Ethan's question would be that I think if you were, I mean, I wasn't on your interview panel at all, but I would have thought that the fact that you had a demonstrably proven detailed knowledge of a subject and also the sort of passion to want to commit to a N-year PhD probably would have stood you in good stead.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Yeah. But I wouldn't want anyone to think that it's necessary.
No, it's not a prerequisite at all.
Yeah,
no,
there's plenty of people that have had an amazing career and got very far. Yeah. And they may only have a bachelor's degree. Yeah. You know, it's not really about the academic qualifications, but it depends on, you know, what you're bringing. Yeah.
As a percentage of the cohort of Hoare Lea, people with PhDs would be 1%?
Yeah,
2%?
maybe 1 or 2%. Yeah.
Next question.
You talked quite a lot about daylight, and you also talked about sort of, I think, social sciences and sort of talking about how people feel. Did you ever find that your work corresponded with? There seems to be sometimes it's sort of cyclical. Sometimes there's a sort of a focus on daylight and its impact on sort of mental and physical health of occupants.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes it seems there's lots of talk of that, and sometimes not. So I don't know if that was something that you.
It is.
Good question.
Yeah, it's a great area, and it's a topic that I'm really, I find endlessly fascinating. And I suppose I don't know if I can answer it objectively, because for me that conversation is always there. But I know maybe you're talking about kind of in the wider, maybe landscape of here studying in the built environment, and then in the general public as well. But I want to get the message out there to the general public more about the importance of daylight for well-being, physical and mental health. And I think there's just ongoing things that never cease to amaze me about things that we're learning. There's emerging science around that as well that I think is really interesting, which I could talk for an hour about. No, I'm not going to, but you know, it's a topic that has absolutely kept me stimulated in this area, you know, because it kind of joins together what you mentioned, in the sense of like there's the sort of technical building performance side of daylight, but then there's the what's it doing for us, and both on a sustainability but particularly in a well-being sense. Yeah.
On the cyclical element of the question, do you think is it in vogue today, daylighting, or has it lost its...
I think it's really hard for me to answer that, actually, because maybe I'm too close to it, but a few years ago, well, quite a few years ago now, the WELL standard was published in the US, and that's now quite mainstream, certainly here. You know, we're using the WELL standard on a lot of buildings that we're working on. And in the WELL standard, there's a focus on daylight not only for sustainability. So it's moved the conversation into well-being. And so I don't know if I could say it's still as hot as it was when it first landed, but I think that it's firmly kind of on the agenda. I think a lot of people, when I talk to them about it, they have direct personal experience of it. You know, they know how they feel during different seasons and stuff like that. So I think a lot of people deep down know that it's important. I don't know if it's ever gone away. Do you know what I mean? But maybe other things bubble up that are more kind of high on the agenda at different times. Yeah, I don't know. Be interesting to know if anyone else has a view on it, you know, based on your experience.
Any other questions? Next question.
I guess daylighting has thermal implications as well in some. Do you kind of collaborate with a building physics team, or is that considered by your team yourself?
Yeah, that's right. So, great question. So, because we have that capability in the sort of firm that I work for, we do collaborate with our building physics team, and not even just building physics, but just in the general MEP parts of the business, we have people who are able to do thermal modelling. So we work closely to try and make sure that we're not fixing one thing and breaking another thing. I'm sure there's a slide with a Rubik's Cube on it somewhere, because that, to me, it's like, that sums it up with building design. It's like, oh great, we've got all of that fixed, and then you turn it over and it's like, oh, now the acoustics is wrong, and now the air quality's gone out the window. So daylight and thermal are two bedfellows that really have that relationship. There's always a bit of push and pull, but there is absolutely ways to solve both, and the key is to just iteratively work together. And if you're within the same firm, there's some advantages, obviously, because you're colleagues, and you can be a lot more forthright with each other and say, well, look, that's not going to work, let's do it like this instead. When it's different consultancies, you have a slightly different relationship in that negotiation, and it can be a little bit more cumbersome, because you're sort of saying, well, we've done the daylight analysis and we've got this answer. What's your, what are you? And they'll say, well, we'll get back to you in 2 weeks, and that kind of thing. So there's a lot less. You're not as agile, maybe, but there can also be advantages to that as well, because sometimes it can be a lot clearer where the demarcation lines are. So I'm not saying one way is always better than the other, but that's how we've chosen to do it. And partly that's because in the lighting team we definitely want to be about lighting, and we don't want to stray into thermal modelling, because that sort of sits in a different area. But other consultancies have set it up in a different way, and that it's not wrong, it's just a different way of doing it. Yeah. I should also say as well that we have developed some tools that address both simultaneously as well. So we've got one tool in particular that I'm really excited about, because it's AI machine learning based. So it's kind of like you can tweak things and then it will quickly generate some data, and it's not going to be super accurate, but it's like gives you an idea of the impact on daylight and the impact on thermal for different window sizes, for example. So I think a lot of firms of our size have got similar approaches, and there are software tools out there that are designed to, there's commercial products out there that do that, because there's a real need in the market for design teams to be able to sit in a workshop and quickly get to solutions. And if I broaden that out to the race to net zero, that's what we need. We need to be able to quickly go, oh, what if we do this? Oh, right, let's see what the impact is, and kind of, okay, we might have to go away and do some more detailed work, but if we can kind of get 90% of the way there in the room, that's really helpful. I'm saying in the room, this might be on Teams, but in the virtual room or in the real room, yeah.
So you were talking about these tools, so it's like a research aspect within the firm?
Yeah, so actually that's a really good point. There's within the firm there is always a certain focus on kind of in-house development and innovation. So in the last few years that's really exploded because of the possibilities in the digital space and harnessing AI as well. So we have invested in that, and I think lots of consultancies of that size will be doing the same thing, some more than others, and if they're not doing it, that's not right, because it's always good if you can develop your own way, your own bespoke tools. There can be, you can end up with a USP, for clients. You can say, well, we've got this tool that does this and no one else has it. But ultimately, sometimes it's about making something that fits the needs of the work that you do, in that business. So it can be tailored to you as well as being unique in the marketplace. And there's lots of pitfalls, because you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money developing an in-house tool and then no one uses it, or you can develop a tool and then the person leaves and nobody supports it. There's all kinds of pitfalls, but I think it's very worthwhile. So there is absolutely a place for a kind of research mindset in a consultancy environment, and I think clients do value it. But ultimately it means that we have to probably increase our overall kind of fee level to cover those kinds of things. It means that like bigger firms have to carry a bit more, cost because of things like that, because of their innovation. There are grants out there. There's grants and funding that can be used to offset that cost. But it's something that in fact it goes right back to the beginning of my career when I started before the year 2000. It was done then, so it's something that I think has always been there, is like a recognition of the need for research and development in a consultancy environment. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, in regards to the fourth point that you made about convincing people, as you said, like one of the significant goals is to reach net zero by 2050, but sustainable development is still, as the title says, a developing area. How do you, are you trying to bring clients over in the projects to suggest more sustainable designs or more innovative designs? What are your obstacles, you think, and how are you trying to approach it?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
$64 million question. Very good.
That's great.
You can go first, Ruth.
I'm sure Ian.
No, I'll follow you.
Good answers to that, but I think it's a daily thing. It's absolutely woven into what we're doing, and probably the correct answer is yes. We're every day we're convincing our clients that that's what they need to do. the reality is that we often fall, and I mean we in the sort of broadest sense, that we are always falling back into, well, this is how we did it last time, and this is what we normally do. You know, this is the standard solution for this problem, so let's do that. And that's why I'm kind of challenging you all to recognise that you have helpful naivety, because you don't have the baggage of we always do it like this, and that's what we need. So I think we have work to do to keep reminding ourselves of that mission, because you can get very lost in the actual minutiae of designing and delivering in the built environment. We can get lost in all of that and forget that ultimately we were trying to move people in a different direction. But yeah.
A couple of things I would say. It's quite useful to understand that clients. I mean, it'd be interesting to ask you. It's very rare for us to say to a client, "You can't do that," or "You're doing that wrong," or "You should be doing this," which I know some firms are a bit more comfortable at saying, but I would say the majority of the professional services firm in the built environment would be very respectful and say, "I hear what you're saying, Mr. Client or Mrs. Client. We can only suggest that if you do that, it's the wrong thing to do, and you should be doing this." But it's very difficult to stand up against that. So that sort of comes back to my wider point, which is that in a way, the client's not wrong there, but they're asking the wrong question, or they're not understanding the question they should be asking. So it's part of this thing that Ruth is touching on, which I think is true, that the whole industry needs to change in some ways, and it needs to morph from doing what it comfortably did yesterday and thinking it can comfortably do tomorrow, when we sort of broadly all know that it can't do that. Because every year goes by, it's a year closer to 2050. But the industry's very stuck in its way. It's very happy to, as I say, do what it did yesterday and think it'll do that tomorrow. I mean, here's a really interesting one. I hadn't really thought about this until you said that. But one of the things that I did latterly in my career was put a new brand together for Hoare Lea, which I think those of you who came along to my talk will have heard me rabbit on about. And basically, it's not like when you rebrand or when you brand an organisation, it has to be like a real thing. It can't be you can't put a false brand identity over a company, because people spot that a mile off. So it has to be authentic. And of course, before we rebranded, we had a successful brand, so it's not like we were trying to be something different. But we used the process of rebranding to actually push certain things front and centre, one of which was the sort of sustainability agenda. And we were a successful firm, and when we rebranded, we still had lots of very well-meaning directors at Hoare Lea or partners at Hoare Lea who would say, "Well, why are we doing that? Why are we? I just want to do what I did. I like putting in big chillers.
Yeah.
In fact, the bigger they're in, the less chance we've got of being sued. So let's put 2 big ones in."
Yeah.
It's just so difficult to shake that sort of inertia. But I don't want that to sound like it's all doom and gloom. It isn't. But it just goes to show that it's very difficult to change people's behaviour. Which brings me back to this point, your item 4 really, which is about the power, and Anna said that last week as well. That it's very difficult to try and win the argument, without being really sneaky around the edges and trying to ask the question in a different way to try and get better outcome and all that sort of stuff. So I 100% agree with what you're saying in item 4. And I was going to sort of put the question back to you really, which is be really interesting for us to understand that in your academic teaching career, what you're being taught here, do you get any advice on that the sort of subtle side, the sort of communication skills, the debating, the argument winning, the emotional intelligence, all that sort of stuff. Is there anything in that area? No? That's a little bit. Sorry, go on.
I think maybe if you're studying architecture,
Yeah.
which I'm partly doing.
Are you on the MN course?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think there you learn a lot of communication skills due to your like design tutorials and projects. But other than that, seeing from other degrees, I don't think they really learn it that much.
Right.
Because they don't really have a lot of direct communication with also the people who are teaching them.
Right.
That's what I personally think.
Right. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
that is really interesting. I think
Diane's
we've
listening
hit
at the
on
back, so
We've hit
I
on
hope so.
something. Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly it's almost the most critical skill set to have, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you have to have all the technical knowledge, but to be able to apply that.
Yeah,
To
I
get
think
results.
if we're just focusing like we are on how can we be effective, then yeah, those skills are really important, because otherwise we can be very effective doers. So we can go away and design things and deliver deliverables, as we call them. You know,
Yeah.
we can focus on generating deliverables, as in documents of a design, drawings, models, documents and things. But that's not really helping us, because we're going to do that anyway. The question is, what are the things that we're designing? What are those things? What are they really having an impact on? So yeah, I think there's some there's a really good thought and a really good direction. You know,
Most of those soft skills can be taught, though, can't
Yeah,
they? I mean,
yeah.
I must admit, I sort of came along coming at this late in my career, and I thought it was one of those things you either had or you didn't have. But that's actually not true.
no,
Those
you
skills
can
can be
definitely
honed.
learn. Yeah, I think anyone can learn to be more effective with those things. And I was kind of hinting at this earlier, or touching on it earlier, which is that we can't all have a personality that means we're naturally able to do those things, but we can have we can learn ways that work for us. So, you know, some of us will have a preferred communication style and a preferred communication method, and being able to kind of dial things up or down while still being true to ourselves is absolutely possible.
Yeah.
And knowing your shadow is linked with it, because the know your shadow bit is about knowing how you come across when you communicate with people. So it's understanding, you know, I have a colleague who's really passionate and driven, but they sometimes come across as quite abrasive because of that, because they care so much, which I really admire, but it can actually get the wrong outcome because they're not able to bring people with them. They're kind of butting up against people. So that's just an example. I'm just picking that out as an example of a thing where we can go out and be crusaders, and sometimes that's not actually being very effective either. So, you know, there's all kinds of dimensions to this. Yeah.
Maybe we can have a chat with Dan about seeing if we can add something into the course.
Well, even on engineering architectural design, actually there are no learning objectives which are related to communication, but through the process of design, because they present frequently, reoccurring, they get better and better, basically through year 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't want them to be polished fully, because they want to be critical evaluator of their works, rather than, because in consultants you need to sell yourself, while the value of academia is teaching people how to become a critical learners. So they're not going, sometimes, their knowledge is not going to be great and everything, but at least they know how to approach the knowledge and how to critically evaluate what is important, what is not. So that is what we are trying to do. But yes, interestingly enough, Engineering Council UK and ARB, which is for architects, they're not requiring actually communication skills. The only thing that they require is project management. And on all these programs, there is a one module, 15 credits, which is usually called project management. But it's not fully integrated.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Have you ever worked on a project where you compared your design performance with field measurement data? and because of that, like, you approached modeling tools in a different way after that?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think it's a bit frustrating because I think we all know that we need to do more of that, and the reality that I've seen on the ground is that we don't do it enough. But I would say there's been a great focus on it in Hoare Lea. So like we did have, and I'm sure it's the case for other consultancies as well, we do have a particular group that have always focused on collecting data, real data from buildings. I think the frustrating thing for me is that it's like the client hires that service but not the other bit. So it's like we're getting insights from one project that we can possibly implement on another. That's how it's supposed to work. I'm being really honest, it's like that's the theory, but the practice isn't always that straightforward. There's loads of challenges around collecting data from real buildings. I think that's getting a lot easier because most of the technology that we implement in buildings now has the capability to capture data, and we have the, in theory again, capability to fill the building with monitoring capability. You know, that can be baked into a lot of what we do, but it's often using different languages, using different platforms, not all on the same system. They've got different, the thing I came up against in my PhD, different time clocks in different systems, you know, just stupid things. All of that is several PhDs worth, and there's still a lot of work to do, I think, in that space of like, how can we really map the data that we collect from buildings and to inform the assumptions that we make in our designs, because they call it the performance gap. It's still there, you know, that we need to close it, and we haven't closed it yet. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question on that, which is because we did again discussed this a bit last week with Anna, the gathering of data post completion for the benefit of the industry as a whole, including the client you were gathering the data from. The aspiration is, you know, it seems like such an obvious thing to do, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
In reality, though, being honest, how many buildings have you gathered data on in your career at Hoare Lea?
I mean, me personally.
What, the group?
Yeah, probably not very much at all, but in the group, we actually had to answer this question, I think, for an entry to CIBSE one year, and it's like, it's less than 10%. I mean, I don't know the exact percentage, but you know, it's less than 10% of the projects that we work on.
And why, I mean, it's interesting, why do you think that is?
So I don't know whether I'm the right person to know the full answer, but in my opinion, it's because we're appointed through the design stages, and the kind of in-use stage, very little is, we're not really being paid to do anything, you know, frankly. Sounds awful, that shouldn't be a reason not to get to net zero, you know. That's a bigger aim that will benefit all of us, but ultimately as a business we have to be able to make things pay, you know, we have to at least break even, right? So we can't have people going to buildings, spending time trying to collect data if the client's not willing to pay for it, unless we can do it in a research and innovation kind of budget. So that's one of the barriers, you know, is that by the time we get to stage 6, things are really tapering off.
REBA stage 6.
Sorry, REBA stage 6. We've got there, and we're kind of we're on site and we're snagging. We're saying, yeah, you need to fix this, this, and this, and then we're good to go. And then we get to practical completion. We take some photographs. We walk away, and it's like we move on to the next one. You know, we mobilise our teams to the next building that we're working on.
It's weird, that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because I think clients with portfolios probably think differently.
Yes.
So clients that have got lots of buildings across, say, London, that won't be good enough. They will want to know, no, hang on, I don't want you going away when we get to stage 6. I want you to stick around, because we need to know if that solution actually works on that building so that we can implement it on the next one. So we do have that kind of work. But it's just, there's so many, I would say, like that kind of volume of work that we do, where it is kind of, yeah, all right, thanks. Or they've got the contractor in, engage the contractor at stage 4, and then the contractor kind of carries most of it after that. So as a consultant, we're kind of minor, and we fade into the fade into the mist, and that's it. Yeah. But yeah, I hope that answers. I think there's a lot of possibility there that hasn't been exploited yet.
I mean, that's a classic case of where, almost everybody in the industry knows that it should be better.
Yeah.
But nobody is sort of being the one who wants to put their foot above the parapet.
Yeah, or maybe there are.
Reba aren't, CIBSE aren't.
Yeah. Or maybe there are pockets of activity there, but we don't know what's going on. And a few years ago, one of my colleagues talked about digital twins, and they were really excited about digital twins. And it's a very exciting sounding phrase, but I haven't really seen it being implemented. So it's like we need to get those things off the page.
Are you all familiar with digital twins as a concept? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again,
it's
that
a great
was
concept.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
that was. I mean, there's probably a handful.
Yeah. But you see, I don't even know if we've scratched the surface of what we could do with, say, AI in that space as well. Like, there's things that I won't be able to think of that you might be able to think of that we can do. Yeah.
Next question.
So do you think that the responsibility is definitely on you as the design consultant to be monitoring following the installation of the system?
No. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. No, I don't think it's clear cut, actually, and maybe that's partly why it's a bit of a grey area. It feels like there's an opportunity if we do monitor, as the designer, if we do monitor, that will inform our work. So it seems like a thing that makes sense to fall into our kind of scope. But the client could equally decide that they want to, do that. And some clients operate buildings that need a on-site estate management team, and they might put it into their scope to do that, because even just on a very basic level, if I was running a large building and I wanted to reduce my energy bills, even if I didn't care about the environment, I might want to reduce my energy bills. I would say to my estates team, so the people that kind of operate, manage and monitor the building and the systems, I might say, yeah, we've got this software, we're implementing this because we want you to give us reports every quarter on how everything is running, and we want to optimize everything and make sure that it's not consuming any more energy than it needs to. And that would sit very firmly within the kind of client organisation. So there's probably a lot of that work that goes on, and we don't necessarily get involved. And academia is actually where the opportunity is, I think, to join those dots, because if people can bring forward case studies, then we can all learn, from them. It doesn't need to be one of our own projects. So, and there have been some examples of that, which have been really good. Yeah.
So following this question about thermal modeling, so we use climate weather data to run our thermal simulation, and we take solar radiation value from that. Do you think that using thermal weather data to refer solar radiation, to consider solar radiation in a thermal modeling is the right thing? Because I was reading one paper where they are saying that the solar radiation data, which is in the climate weather data, is not that sufficient to use it on a thermal modeling.
Yeah, that's right.
So that also leads to overheating point of view.
Yeah, this is a real hot topic at the moment, because it's quite recently published research that shows that the weather data that we're using is fundamentally flawed. Yeah. So it's a really interesting issue, and I don't have the answer, because I think at least we know now that there is a deficiency in the data. The question is, what can we do about it? So the paper that I read about it was a while ago, I can't quite remember, but I think they were suggesting that there are some weather stations that can capture that data in a different way that means it's more accurate. So there's like a smaller cohort of weather stations across the UK that capture solar radiation data in a way that means it's more realistic and more reflective of the climate, and so we should be using that. So there's some quite simple steps. So I flagged it to our team, and to make sure that we're using the correct data. But I'm not saying that means the problem goes away or that it's perfect, because it's only a matter of time before we uncover something else. Like, we've been using weather stations for a long time and just kind of relying on them being accurate when it actually weather stations came into being for a very different purpose, didn't they, to the purpose that we use the data today. So I think I'm kind of waiting for the next thing to reveal itself, you know. But I think what you've said ties into the question of the changing climate as well, and the fact that we use weather data from existing conditions, and then we have future scenarios, and there's probably a lot more question marks about the future scenarios that we're using as well, and whether they're extreme enough or too extreme, or, you know, we don't know. Yeah.
Good question.
So now, for example, when you work on a new buildings, so are you considering the current weather data, or you are referring to like the future predicted weather performance?
So for daylight, we're just using existing, but for thermal, there's future scenarios that we look at as part of the CIBSE TM. Is it 59? Yeah.
Question answer.
Apologies for coming.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Thanks for coming anyway.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Okay, so following up on your question about the post-occupancy evaluation.
Yeah.
So you said that less than 10% of you collect the post-occupancy evaluation for less than 10% of the buildings. So how effective are those evaluations? And do you think the government should maybe fund ask the consultancies to gather this data and maybe fund the gathering of its costs?
That's a great question. I think, so your first question was how effective is the data that's being collected. I think it's a really good question because it kind of relates back to something I said earlier about people and how people are actually at the heart of all of this. And most of the data that we collect is about system performance, not about people's experience. So it's only really in academic research that we capture people's experiences as well. Broadly speaking, there are some cases where clients use occupant surveys to gauge comfort levels and things like that. And that's mainly, I think, because it's such a messy business, because you can capture quantitative data from equipment. It just is what it is, and it's fine. No one needs to really do a lot of interpretation of it, if you like. There's a bit of analysis, but when it comes to occupants, you ask occupants questions and they will answer a different question. You know, you ask them, how's the temperature? And they say, well, I get headaches and it's the lights. You know, so you get all kinds of interesting data, but not necessarily the data that you need to answer the question that you've asked. And one of the things that I learned was ask the right question, or, you know, you kind of make sure that you're not leading them in one direction or another, and so on. So there's loads there that I think have kept people away from asking occupants how they feel, and also observing how occupants interact with systems, which is a secondary way to capture people's experience. So it's not them saying, it's how they behave. How often do they open the blinds? How often do they switch the lights on or off, and so on? So I think there's a really rich seam of data there that isn't really being captured. And your second question and point about the funding, that kind of is the answer to why it hasn't been done. And I think in fairness, there are plenty of projects that are funded. You know, like there's plenty of examples of research projects that effectively the government is funding research that is trying to capture data from buildings. I just don't know whether it's enough, because I think maybe there's a kind of like they're quite isolated, and those projects in an academic context, they take years to then be published. So nobody's necessarily able to learn from them in a kind of cycle of typical project design, and that's another issue as well. So we need more and more kind of collaboration between academia and industry partners to try and bring the best of both worlds to that. You know, to have the academic rigor of collecting the data in the right way, analysing the data, and then feeding that into the real on the ground designing buildings processes. You know, so that we can get the most out of it. Yeah.
I think I would add to that I think. Going back to Ruth's first point, so that, you know, how well does Building X perform in terms of how, you know, how efficient is the boiler and how efficient is the heat pump and all that sort of stuff. I think it's easy to gather that data,
Yeah.
and it would be really valuable to the next time you design a building with a heat pump and a boiler in. For some reason, that is incredibly difficult to achieve, and I think my gut is that that's all about a cultural desire to want to be open. I think
Yeah, that's true.
I think there's a fear. I mean, before I go into the second bit, I would say that most buildings perform really well. It's not like we're building a whole load of buildings which is bad. It's not that at all. It's just that they're not optimised enough. That maybe the equipment could have been 15% smaller or whatever, and that's where gathering that data would be very helpful. But there is a fear in the professional services industries, the designers side of things, and also the construction people who actually build the buildings, who offer a warranty on that. We as professional services firms would offer a warranty on its performance as well. There is this deep fear that somehow or other, if the client only knew, then we would be sued, or the contractor would be sued. But it's not that. That's, you know, I think that's an overblown, old-fashioned fear. I think, like again, if I was starting my career again, I would. In fact, I remember that almost the last project I ever worked on was a college for at the University of Oxford, and they were building a new library, and it was absolutely the first design team meeting where everybody comes, you know, everybody who's interested in the project, including the client. And I said to the client, when we had any other business, I said, isn't now the right time to survey all the people who use your library? Because I can tell you that over the 5 years it's going to take you to build this building, sooner or later somebody's going to say, why on earth are you spending £12 million on a new library when we had an old library which is perfectly acceptable? Now's the time to sit down with those students and say, what do you really think about this library? You know, when you turn up, are there enough computers? Is it easy enough to get? What's the conditions like in the site? Because that will give you a really useful thing to do, to fight off all of this issue that's going to come over the course of the life of building the building. But also, when you finished your building, you can then do another set of data, and you can say, look, I spent £12 million, and I got the data, I got the results from here to here. And I thought he's bound to say yes. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to know what people thought of my library? Because they might tell me it was awful, and you think, oh no, if only you could just be a little bit more holistic about the whole thing. And I think that sort of captures where we are as an industry. There's this fear of being, in some way or other, being found out. Whereas if I was a client, the first thing I'd want to know is that my consulting engineer was interested enough as to how their last building performed, so I, who was going to be commissioning their next building, would actually get the benefit from that. Seems such a fundamentally simple thing to do. It would only be a good thing, but yet it doesn't really happen. So, again, you know, as you say, we're looking at you. That's what we want you to do when you come out into the world of work.
But there's some kind of cultural...
I was going to use the cultural word,
yes,
but it is a cultural issue.
Yes, interestingly, for example, HMM, which is one of the bigger architectural practices in the UK, they won a Sterling Prize basically for Burntwood School. And they wanted to be independently basically evaluated, and we have done it together with them. And the school didn't perform up to the standard of you might expect it was a Sterling Prize winner, although this kind of performance for RIBA at that time, it was not really defined well. And they wanted to publish everything.
Yeah.
And absolutely to be transparent.
Yeah.
And they said, listen, we learned from our mistakes, our next building is going to be better.
Yeah, and we'd like you to learn from our mistakes as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While some other practices, basically, they're not very keen to do
And
that.
also, to be fair to professional services, some other clients don't want to do that either. Because at the end of the day, the data the building is generating is usually owned by the client. So it's not our data.
A good example is Mazda, basically, in Middle East. The client didn't want to release any data of these campuses, but for very good reason.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the fear around who owns the data and what we might reveal if we publish it is a factor. Yeah, I don't know how much it's a factor in stopping us from doing it, but it's definitely part of the story.
It is,
Yeah.
Any other questions?
If you're not monitoring or taking in that much data from the previous project, what's your largest source for innovation, and how do you measure success at Hoare Lea? Because for me, like, at least looking from the outside in, I'd assume that, okay, I'm going to look at what my building performance is actually like when the building's occupied, and that's going to determine, oh, this project was a success or a failure.
Yeah, our metrics for success are still very bound up in the kind of REBA stage conversation, so they probably aren't long term enough. So I think we think success is that we've designed and delivered a building, and that, because that's such a huge milestone, and it takes years from start to finish. By the time you get to that, everyone is just really happy to kind of say, yeah, great, we're done.
Yeah.
And let's move on to the next thing. And so so how we measure success is largely around kind of happy client, happy design team. Client wants us to work with them again on another project.
Yeah.
That's how we measure success.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right that, like, what we should really be measuring it on is how the building performs in use. And in our defence, I think we have tried to put more focus on it by having a particular group of people in the firm that are dedicated to that. But it's just not happening on enough buildings. And it does seem to be mainly around portfolio clients that have several properties across the country or across a city, who have like a real vested interest in that longer view of how their assets will perform over time. And partnering with them has been really good, for everybody. But perhaps we need to do more of that. Yeah.
And in our defence, a little bit, I don't know why I'm saying that, but it's important to remember that a building is an incredibly complicated thing. It's not like a car. You can make a Tesla, and I've said it'll do 16 miles to the gallon, and if it doesn't do 16, I can sue you. I mean, I remember the example somebody said to me once is if you drive at 80 miles an hour in second, it's going to use second gear, when cars used to have gears, it's going to use an awful lot more fuel than if it's driving in sixth. So, but the reality of it is that once we all spend 2 years designing a building, during which you're taking a brief from the client, and then you spend another 2 years building it. When it's occupied, it's invariably occupied and used in a totally different way than the brief. Which is why it's always useful to have a bit of a margin in your sizing to account for different occupancy. But it gets very difficult to normalise the post-occupancy data back to your design criteria, and that's so it is complicated to do that, but it still can be done.
It can absolutely be done,
and should be done.
Yeah, and it should be done more. But that's a good point, that things will change in the life of the design and construction process because the programs typically take years. Things will change, the client's needs will change, technology will change. There's several things there that when we then try to measure success, it could be a bit unfair that we're not measuring against the original criteria that we had, for example.
Sorry to move on from post-occupancy, but what was your favourite project you've ever done and why?
That's a really good question, which I
I mean, the one that I kind of go to a lot is I had a picture of it. Where is it? Oh God, this is traumatic going back through those photos. It's this one here, which is called Life and Mind Building in Oxford, and it's just been officially opened last week. And this is a new faculty building for University of Oxford, and it's bringing together some faculties that didn't previously sit in the same building, and the sort of research benefits of that are going to be great just on its own. But I really liked being involved with this building because Well, number one, we did daylight analysis and lighting design, and I'm really happy that whenever we have an opportunity to do both in one building, that's great. The thing about this one is it has an atrium, as you can see in this photo, and the architect originally had a concept of circular openings because they had this kind of language that it comes up across the building. It's a really big building. There's sort of like this motif of circles, and so they had a ceiling that had some big circular openings, and I persuaded them to abandon the circles and introduce an ETFE roof. And the ETFE is like a kind of a plastic that is inflated, so you might have seen it on a couple of other buildings, but it's sort of, it means that there's no structure, so you kind of have like an uninterrupted opening, transparent opening, really large span. We tested it with all the acoustics and everything to make sure that it was going to be good, and it means that more daylight gets into all the offices that overlook the atrium. And we did a lot of daylight analysis that went into more granular detail than we normally do, which I loved. You know, it was getting back to the people thing, which is what I loved, because it was like, who's sitting in this office? What's it going to feel like for them? And you know, that's the sweet spot for me. And we also did some virtual reality modelling on it as well, which was really good fun. We created some immersive virtual reality models that showed what the daylight conditions might be like if the sill of the window was here or here, and if the atrium opening was this or this, and so on. And that was really good. Yeah, we don't always get to do that.
It just goes to show what you said earlier on about why you came back into consulting rather than academia, is because you have that ability to shift the dial and achieve something, and then be really proud of it and see it. No, I don't mean that. I don't mean that at all.
No,
you know what I'm saying. But you have, in the real world, outside academia, just to annoy Dan even more, you have that ability to create something that you can stand back and say, I did that.
Yeah, I think
at any stage in your career.
That was the thing that probably drew me back to consultancy, was there's something kind of more, I guess it's a tangibility thing, isn't it, of, oh, I did that, or yeah. But I must say, I don't feel I can say that a lot. I think this building, I was very fortunate that lots of things came together. There's lots of buildings that I've worked on that are not exciting, and I haven't had much of an impact, but I've tried, and you know, that's all we can do. Yeah, but I hope you guys can do better, you know, you can do better.
This might be like a quick question, but if a client employs Hoare Lea to consult on a lighting, sort of from a lighting perspective, are they also guaranteed to employ Hoare Lea from like a mechanical systems perspective as well? Or could you could be working with another engineering firm?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So no, the short answer is no. If they employ us to do lighting, it doesn't mean we're doing other things, but most of our projects are multidisciplinary, because we work better that way. It's better for the client ultimately if they employ us to deliver a range of different systems, and we can kind of integrate everything much better for them. We do have a proportion of work that is lighting only, and what I would say about that is, as a lighting practice, that's really important, because it tends to be the more kind of weird and wonderful stuff that a little bit esoteric, like we've worked on a couple of art installations with light in them, and you know, a client doesn't need mechanical services there. So do you know what I mean? There's a few, we've done some hotels where perhaps they've used an in-house team to do mechanical and then us to do lighting, and so there's a few different scenarios where it's important to us to have a lighting portfolio that's creative and exciting, as well as perhaps some of the volume work that we do where there's buildings and they have lighting in them, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Somebody asked a question last time or the time before about if you sat here looking for your first job, what sort of business would you look to? because you mentioned multi-dis and not multi-dis,
Yeah.
and there's sort of contractor design as well as professional services design, small, large. What would you, it's perhaps a difficult question to ask, but you know what I mean. What advice would you offer?
Difficult for me to answer it without putting my own kind of biases on it. So I think you guys will find what suits you. But I was drawn to a large company and a multidisciplinary company for the reasons that I've explained. The size was important because they had structures and systems in place that were really helpful for me. So I gained chartership in 2006, largely thanks to my first employer, AMEC, because they had such a good graduate program. Their program meant that I was able to log all my learning and my CPD and have all the documentation that I needed to gain chartership earlier on in my career, which was really fortunate because I've seen how if it's left till later, you're just so busy and you're like, I don't have time for this. And, you know, it's good to get these things kind of in progress at least. So being in a larger firm can have that advantage because they often have training programs and a lot of support to help you get professional registration in your particular discipline. So that is an advantage. But I'm trying to be really balanced here. That's what I would look for. That's what I'm drawn to because I've seen how useful that's been for me. People will feel a lot more at home in a smaller firm, you know, where perhaps things are more friendly and there's less layers of hierarchy, fewer layers of hierarchy to work through, maybe a flatter structure, maybe everyone's treated a lot more kind of as equals, and that can be really stimulating as well. And sometimes it's nice to work on small projects that are turned around quickly because you get to see results quickly, and that's really fulfilling as well. You know, you get to work for a client and be a lot more intimate in it. I don't mean physically, you know, intimately working with them, partnering with them and with the design team a lot more regularly if you're working on small projects. So yeah, there's pluses and minuses to all of it.
Good answer. Right, since it's 25 to 7, probably time to stop. So thank you very much, Ruth.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
useful.
you. Thanks for all the